microphone, but it was actually too much last time. So I think it's fine. Like,
Really?
yeah, it was like I listened to the feedback and mine was like blaring, and Christy, who I was talking to, hers was like perfect without. So I don't know. We'll figure it out. Um, okay, we're just gonna dive in. We're just gonna dive in. Okay, okay. So my guest today is one of my closest friends. We are coming up on 17 years of friendship, which sounds insane, because we're only 21. And we met at this weird time in life that was like both the the darkest time, but also we were having like the most fun, but it was like dark fun. So it wasn't really we were coping and we were finding ourselves and lost in the mountains of Telluride, Colorado. And since then, there's been years that there's been, long periods of time where we haven't talked and then we catch up. And every time we catch up, it is like zero time has passed. She is someone who innately understands me, like gets my mood right away. We pick up where we left off. And I always know, like, if there's somebody that you want to hear the truth from, it's going to be Gretchen.
God.
Like, she's not going to bullshit me at any point, even if I want her to. And I love that in a friend. It's my favorite thing about friends. And I wanted her to come on today because I feel like she's got this like really fucked up but incredible story about basically about women's health and in her women's health journey and her journey with endometriosis, which affects I don't know how many women. We can look it up. Um, but the majority of women at some point in our lives are going to have to face something that has to do with our reproductive health. And Gretchen is one of those people that had a really, really like horrendous experience. And so I wanted to bring her on and talk about it. So this is my girl, Gretchen.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited for you. I love that you're doing this.
Good, 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 good. I love it too.
And yeah, open book. I feel like you know me well enough to know that you can ask me anything, and if I don't want to answer, I'll tell you.
Yes. You'll plead the fifth. Okay,
Yeah.
so start with like, you know what? Let's start with what did you think early on in life? Did you want to be a mom or like what was your idea of motherhood before?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I think I've always had kind of a tumultuous relationship with motherhood and what it means to be a mother and um, kind of the nature versus nurture of it all as well. I grew up in a really Presbyterian family, especially thinking like our generation, late 80s, early 90s. You were in sundresses, you were meant to find a husband, not a boyfriend. You didn't talk to boys until someone was gonna like coin you their wife. Like very dramatic, but it did feel like that to me. My grandfather was the minister of our church, so there was just a lot of kind of religion wrapped into how I identified with the women in my life. And I say all that because I think that really did lay a pretty foundational level for me of scrutiny at a very early age around what it means to be a mother and how that relates to femininity and being a woman overall, and kind of like all these other things that I've struggled with my whole life because I don't want to be trapped or confined to a certain defined role. And I feel like motherhood kind of fell into that for me for a while. I love children. I love the idea of like it takes a village. It does take a community to raise a child. So having one individual be like the crux of all of that seemed unfair as well. Like it just, yeah, I think there's a part of me that's always thought that I had potential to be a great mother and be a nurturer and like have a big family. And over time, things change and circumstances change. And so there is a level of like resetting expectations. But I think there was never a part of me, I should say, that was like dead set on I'm going to be a mom, I'm going to have X amount of kids by this age.
Right.
And that base came from everyone around me telling me that I would and that I should.
And it's the expectation. And not just the expectation of your gender role, it's also this expectation that like that's just going to come easy for you.
Yes. I think and it's not even just the come easy for you, but that regardless of how you feel, there's no autonomy in the decision. Like
Right.
this is just what living means, right? Like we're pilgrims and we need to continue on. Like it's just a wild kind of um pressure put on me from a very young age. And I feel like it's translated into everything, like how I even think and talk about sex or my sexuality. Like you were not given the space to have mature conversation or question anything. It's like,
Mhm.
no, you're going to find a husband, or really, he's going to find you if you're lucky and pump some babies out of you. And like, I mean,
Put them all in Lauren Ashley dresses.
yeah, and like I absolutely adore my aunt and my little cousins. I always had a baby on my hip. I grew up around a lot of kids. I am really good with kids. But no one in my life ever seemed particularly happy or like glowing to be a mother. And I don't mean that as a criticism. Um, it's just what you perceive, right? And what you're surrounded with. Um, we're all sponges. So it was never lost on me that like, okay, I had this person on one side who had no kids, this person who had a couple and was really struggling, and then someone else who has three or four, and everyone seems like they're a shell of themselves
Yeah. Wow. 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 I love this. I
as
mean, I
mothers.
hate that and I
Um,
love it, but because it's so true and you were able to see that and be able to break out of that cycle and see what happens when people maybe didn't have that autonomy to end up breaking out of that cycle.
yeah, and I think part of it too is like it kind of be careful what you wish for, right? Like I don't want to use the word manifest, but when you do put certain things out into the universe, right? So from like very early on, and I'm talking like 10, 11 years old, people coming at me having a boyfriend or a crush or, all these things. I immediately started like as early as 10 being like, I'm never getting married. I'm never having kids. And it was really a flippant fuck you
Right.
to my family, basically. But then obviously fast forward to my 20s and realizing, oh, I might not physically be able to have my own children. That changes a huge part of the narrative, not only for me, but my potential partner, family, unit, whatever that looks like later in life. Now I have a different, heavy responsibility to navigate my own feelings through this and make sure that I'm responsibly communicating my circumstances to whoever that partner is. Because if I can't have kids and adoption's the only option, right? Like it just opens this whole can of worms
Right.
to like different issue areas to negotiate. It's not a bad thing. It's just, it can be heavy.
So jumping ahead to when you did start to figure that out, like when you first, I guess when you first were diagnosed with endometriosis or when you first realized something's not right here, like talk about that.
Yeah. So I had really, really awful menstrual cycles and all of my symptoms surrounding really women's health issues from as early as I can possibly remember. I got, my first period at 11 years old, and I remember like no education, no one talked about it. I didn't know what to do. It was, mind you, take it back, Bo and I can relate on this, like both homeschooled kids. I was homeschooled from, you know, third grade through sixth, came back to public school in seventh grade, and I had gotten my period in school, making like new friends of old friends. I'm the weird girl that was like Christian homeschooled for 4 years. and like a hot mess, but I had no clue what to do. And some people had maybe started that, but no one was really talking about it. And I didn't have older sisters or like older like females in my peer group that I could turn to. So it just like I say all that because it took me a long time to kind of catch up to how much of my disease had probably existed and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't aware because I also didn't have a great understanding of the broader, like, hey, these are the things that are normal for women as
Yes.
they're like going through these different times physiologically. And not having that foundation makes it really hard to navigate the unknown. So you think
It's
everything like
scary.
spaghetti on the wall, right? Like, oh, you have allergies. Oh, you have like gastro issues. Oh, it's because you're lactose intolerant. And now I'm 38, and all these years later, like I had to do 2.5 decades of research, education, and advocacy for myself
Mm-hmm.
to understand that, like, one, endometriosis is something I have. It's an autoimmune. It's never going away. I've made some really significant decisions regarding the management of my health, but it's chronic and will be with me forever. And so now I have to think about what all those things mean. Like all my gastro issues directly linked to my endometriosis. I didn't know that until I was 30 something. Completely changed my life.
Um, the period conversations as kids. I understand that too. My mother terrified me about my period. Like it was like Carrie. It was like the worst thing I could ever do was have a period, and I didn't even know what the it was. I was like, okay. Now sometimes I've tried to hide it for years until I flushed a pad and she figured it out. I was 14. She never got to ask me. I've forgiven her. I went to therapy to forgive her. Fine. It's her own shit.
Flushing bloody diapers. It's fine. Totally
Yeah.
normal.
Yes, totally fine.
Big time.
But it does, and I have another friend too she was raised in Catholicism. I was raised in just general Christianity, which that's why my mom was praying in tongues at my vagina when I was 9 years old, thinking I was getting my period. That's a whole other thing. But the through line, my other girlfriend too, she also hid her period. And it's just this through line of shame really from this really young age in a very the most natural thing for our bodies to do as we become older is so often mired in shame that we learn from our mothers or that we learn from the women around us. I do feel like that is, I know for Georgia's, generation, that's going to be changing. Like we're having a period party,
Yes.
or I wouldn't take it too far probably. But but I just feel like when something starts out in that shame, not only do you have to, when you get to the point of like doing your own advocacy and your own research, you're also having to dismantle all of the things that you thought about your body from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Um, so when you started getting into kind of like that, okay, something's wrong. I need to go figure this out. You're doing your own research. Where did that take you to next?
A lot of sadness and frustration. I don't think that it can be kind of underscored enough that through all of this, I'm not an affluent person. I am, young, single female trying to navigate now the healthcare system on top of all of the familial and cultural issues that I'm trying to navigate and like do everything perfectly and don't talk about, kind of to your point, very similar, like you don't talk about your period. I've been getting it for years, mom, but oh, caught me like the one time I couldn't destroy the evidence.
Yes,
Um, so building off of all that, now it's, oh, not only do you have to talk about it, you have to talk about it at length and be able to represent yourself like a goddamn attorney in every doctor's office that you go to. Also, combating your insurance companies to make sure that the care that you're trying to receive is covered um, was a really rude awakening for me. especially post college, like being thrown into kind of almost like baby bird out of the nest, right? Like if you have been fortunate enough to be in a smaller community or have kind of the same network of doctors that you see most of your life, that's one thing, but mine were all old white dudes. And I wasn't having these conversations with them readily. It was just you suck it up, right? Like, yeah, I'm in excruciating pain, but everyone complains about their period cramps. Everyone complains about having to, the pad versus tampon debate, whatever. But all these other things are like not going away from me and they're getting worse over time. Like college, I will never forget, like, I was very, very skinny. And I was very skinny up until really like mid 20s. That was a lot of hormonal change for me. I was struggling to gain weight when I was younger and then struggling to lose weight in like my mid 20s as all these like crazy hormonal shifts are happening. And I'm supposed to be able to communicate this to doctors that are like, just take birth control. This is a new birth control. Take this, take that. Then my mom is upset because I'm 15 years old and the doctor's saying, take birth control. That goes over well in a Christian family. Um, see where we are in 2024. We still can't have meaningful discussions about reproductive rights. So I I'm going off on a tangent, but a lot of that I just feel like is there's so much history that I've repressed about my journey through figuring out what I need, and I'm still not there. I can say firmly in 2024, I still don't have a trusted network of doctors, and most of that is because I can't keep the same doctor. There are just too many games in the background with reimbursement. So getting to a point where like my disease was so debilitating, but it was being lumped in with every other female that has a period. Like I will never forget bartending one night, and I had gone through, mind you, this is way too much TMI, but like multiple pairs of panties, two pairs of pants. I was packing a full duffel bag of clothing anywhere I went. Like that was my life. And I look back at that now, I'm like, oh, no wonder I repressed that, right? It's terrible. It's like the trunk of my car, anywhere I was, like you had to have an emergency because I never knew it was going to happen. The amount of seats that I had like gotten up from and been mortified.
Yeah. And what is that? Then there's more shame,
More
more
shame.
hiding, more repressing.
Yeah. And like, oh, here comes the like
The bloody
negative
bitch.
Nancy. Yeah, the bloody bitch coming into the office. All she does is complain and she sits there hunched over, looking like a troll, bitching to everybody about life. Well, yeah, I was miserable. I was in physical and emotional pain all the time. And so my threshold, if like a normal person's 10 is like, I can't work, my average was a 20 every day, where you're just like, you get used to the headaches, you get used to like looking like an actual ogre when you're bartending or trying to do anything on your feet because you're hunched over, looking like you're grabbing your appendix all day
My God.
from like shooting pains. And it got to the point where it's like, damn, if something doesn't change, I'm going to have to go on disability. Like
Yeah.
I am becoming so erratic because of the physical pain and the emotional, because I wasn't talking about it. I didn't have a support group. I felt like an alien,
Hmm.
any group setting. And I remember getting like very, you know me, I can get chirpy, I can get petty if I feel a little like off kilter. I was so jealous of every friend that I had. If I went into a bathroom and I saw light tampons, I
No.
wanted to burn the bitch down, burn the whole thing down. Like, oh, I have some cramps. Like, and that's not who I am. Like, I don't want to be comparing like my
You're
pain to someone else's, but when you feel like no one can relate, it just becomes this whole self-fulfilling
well, yeah. You
thing of like,
feel
you're not talking about it. And when you do, you sound, especially because I hadn't talked about it for so long and really up until right now haven't to this extent. Like, when you do in sound bites and snippets, it comes off like you're a one-upper of your pain. Like my situation's worse
hmm
versus being able to like find community of people that are like, my God, I get you. Like, I've had 20 procedures for my endo, or I've had X, Y, and Z. Like, there are always worse or better stories on the spectrum, right?
Yeah,
And it's like
absolutely.
how you communicate that, or like are willing to speak to yours if you're asked.
Well, and it's hard because you're carrying around, it's like that, it's invisible, you know? And so that makes it even harder because it makes people judge you or it makes you judge other. It's just like a cacophony of judgment because there's so much that you can't talk about or don't feel comfortable talking about because there's so much that hasn't been talked about.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously always like compounding factors with anything in life. I think especially things like this that are so personal to not only like who the individual is, but everyone that they touch, right? Like your community, your family, your network. Um, it had a crazy impact on all my previous relationships as well. And not just romantic, but my friendships. Like there were people that I was not able to be there for at certain times that still really hurts, right? Because I can't get that time back. I can forgive myself for not being able to be there because of my circumstances, but that I feel like there's always that little bit of like ennui
Right.
um, when you carry something your whole life and don't really have a way to articulate it and
Mm-hmm.
then move forward in it and with it. I feel like over the past 5 or 6 years, I have, or I'm getting to a better place because I'm willing to rip the band-aid off, unabashedly talk about it, support whoever's going through it. The amount of underdiagnosis is insane. The lack of research um, is starting now, and it's exciting to see how many women are coming forward like, oh, this is crazy. Like if this were happening to men,
Right, right, right.
it would have been put into prostate care, right? Like whatever the equivalent is. Uh,
Yeah.
so there's like finding the bright spots is great, but I do think there's I don't know, back to your earlier question about motherhood. I think that is something that I'm still, if I'm honest, haven't completely faced. But the grieving process of like making that decision to have a hysterectomy at 31. Um, I had been asking for a hysterectomy since I was 22. I found out at 19 years old from my gynecologist then that the odds were incredibly low that I would be able to have my own children because of my condition. Um, and of course, the immediate is, well, we need to talk to your partner. And we also think that you should start freezing eggs and think about IVF and all these other things. And it's like, well, you know, my life situation was I chose basically my student debt for my education. I don't have six figures to throw around for, a
Mm-hmm.
30% chance that I might be able to carry my own. Um, I will say the caveat for me, I was always very open to the idea of adoption. So although having to make that decision was really hard at the time in which that like kind of pinnacle came to be, I was in so much pain. It's like, okay, my quality of life, like I'd rather stay alive and worry about like hanging on for the potential that maybe I might carry my own child that could probably kill me.
Right,
Um,
right.
and my mom was adopted, her brother was adopted, so I benefit from the knowledge of that process, and I have other friends who have chosen to go like foster care adoption and have their own challenges, certainly. But that it's an option was always something for me that like made it a little bit easier to come to that decision. Um, but not being married at the time, being 30 in a relatively new relationship of a couple of years and having to have this like really heavy conversation of like, hey, I know you say you don't want kids, and I trust that, but like, baby boy, we've been together for 2 years and life is crazy and changes. And you hear this all the time, especially from men of like, I don't want kids, I don't want to get married. And then all of a sudden,
Boom.
50 plus,
Yeah.
ready to go, and they still can. Awesome that you have that ability. Us, not so much. So it was very like, I'm being respectful of you, and I want you to know that like this option is off the table if you stick with me.
And he did.
He did.
He did.
He did.
And that's the thing that always, when I think about you and I think about all of this, what drives me insane is doctors saying we need to talk to your partner, who is your boyfriend of 2 years at the time.
They wanted a signed document for my hysterectomy that I had a conversation with him. At first, the surgeon wanted me to bring him into the office, and I was like, this is none of his business. Love him,
Right.
respect him, but like if he was going through a medical issue right now and didn't want to include me in that decision-making process, I respect that. Like we moved in together yesterday. I'm not giving this man everything, and like this is my health. And at that point, like, well, I had been fighting with doctors for over 15 years. As an adult at that point, you're like, I'm at my wit's end. This is across geographies.
Right, right, right.
I don't owe you or him anything. And mind you, like, can we just like call a spade a spade? This is a for-profit system. I'm a consumer. I'm asking you to do something.
I'm
Do
here
it.
for a service.
I'm
Let
gonna
me
pay
see
for it.
the picture. Yeah. And it's not only is it none of his business at the time, right? Like we're talking about 2 years in, Brett. It's none of their business, like what your relationship status is and how invasive. I agree
I'll
with
never forget I had a cyst on my ovary. This was in 2015, I think, 2016. So I finally had my hysterectomy in 2018. But this was like, oh, wow. Okay. Mind you, just a little historic context. My mom, although she was adopted, so we don't have her like further family medical history, she was never officially diagnosed with endometriosis. She had it, certainly. And they kept pushing her and saying that her pain would go away once she had kids. So she had me, pain didn't go away. And this has been a common, like, wives' tale of endometriosis. Have a baby, it goes away. Well, okay. I mean, we also used to like rub people's gums with cocaine to make them feel better.
does that
Like,
not sound well? Listen, I don't listen. Jury's
wild.
out on rubbing cocaine on your gums can make you feel better in some.
100%. Full ass clinical physicians were doing that back in the day. Oh, she has hysteria, melancholy.
Give her an orgasm, she'll be fine.
Yeah, like real talk, that's what medicine felt like to me. Or you're like, okay, so you're not coming at even my mother with facts. Like you're not willing to do the exploratory procedure to go in and just like confirm, because
Hmm.
that's what it takes, unfortunately. Like you have to be able to see the scarring from endometriosis. But she had 2 kids and it never got better. So she ended up having a hysterectomy at 34.
Hmm.
That's very, very young. And at the time, she threatened to sue her doctor and insurance company because no one would cover it. And she had already had 2 kids and was not planning on having more. And they still wouldn't allow her because she was baby making.
That is incredible.
So, like, everything over her health, right? Your situation doesn't matter, right? Like she did everything they told. She made humans. Like I'm grateful I'm here, but like,
Like, oh, okay, I'll just have a baby real quick so that maybe you'll treat me. I'll have two babies real quick so that maybe you'll treat me.
and then my grandma on my dad's side had her own stuff, never confirmed endometriosis, but other like women's health issues. She had a hysterectomy at 50, which, mind you, like that's still really young because they're not common.
Well, not only that, like imagine so if it's your grandmother on your dad's side, you're taking a hysterectomy, you're taking a major female reproductive system surgery in the 60s, right? Which is just fucking terrifying.
Wild, right? Like, and even my mom, when she had her hysterectomy, and I remember my aunt being really nervous about me having it done because it's a sensitive area, right? Like they can absolutely destroy your intestines, your bladder. And a lot of women who have hysterectomies end up having bladder issues. And there have been like terrible horror stories of women that are basically catheterized for the rest of their life because surgery went wrong. Like all it is one little nick.
Yeah.
Um, and this is super invasive, but I don't care. I think it's fascinating. I struggled for years with my um, digestive system.
Hmm.
And I always had a feeling that it was connected, but I didn't know how. And I would go through these phases of like changing my diet, but then after a couple years, something would change again. Like I could never quite pin it down. And alcohol, especially. So, like, yeah, drinking in college, drinking in like your 20s and even 30s, like, there was a point in time where I was like, I physically cannot drink wine. I
Hmm.
was immediately vomiting and like sick for days. Almost thought I had to be like hospitalized if I had more than a couple glasses of red wine, especially. So I stopped for a while. I think it's a lot of the sugar in
Right.
alcohol, right? And inflammation and all of these things. But it was like every couple years, something pretty significant would change in terms of my body rejecting something I was consuming or doing. Um, and that's even after having a hysterectomy. I still have to go like be a little bit more aware of like what my body is going through. If all of a sudden it's like, yo, like cut back on dairy or
Right.
no, you love your pizza girl, but maybe we just like take a break for a little while.
So I didn't know that endo was a oh, what did you say earlier?
Autoimmune.
Autoimmune, right? I didn't know that. So what, for people who don't know, what is it? Like, how would you categorize it?
So it's really a chronic condition, and it's been related to reproductive health because the epicenter for women is around your uterus and ovaries and your reproductive organs, but it can spread anywhere within the body. There have been cases of women that had uh, endometria, like scarring on their brain, on their like really any organ in your body. Those cases might be more rare. I don't know if they're actually that rare. They're just not studied.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit of chicken or the egg by the time those of us that actually are able to like get the care we need. I think it's different now, giving full credit to a lot of the OBGYNs out there doing research in this area. I think there is a lot more awareness, especially from younger doctors that have been focused on these things. But certainly that was like, okay, you have stomach pain, you're constipated, or you have diarrhea, or whatever, right? You go to the gastro. You're kind of sent off to all these other specialists, and no one's talking to each other. So I think for a long time, no one was thinking about endometriosis or adenomyosis as a chronic condition,
Hmm.
but more singular, kind of myopically focused on like women's reproductive issues. And s yes, that's one piece of it, but it's much larger in terms of how it affects the entire body and system.
Yeah, they kind of all just get lumped together, really, right? Like PMS, endometriosis, PMDD, all of these things, it just kind of goes into one big maxi pad. And
Yeah,
then, you know, um, and I do think that you're right about like younger doctors or like just this new generation. I've learned so much about periods from Gen Z, and I've learned so much about periods from TikTok, like things that I'm like, holy shit, that's what this is. I've been experiencing this, and no one's ever talked about it. And when it comes to hormones, it's kind of like I love my doctor, but my doctor is kind of like, unless your period's a little wonky, your hormones, she's like, we can't really find them because the one minute they could be up, the next minute they could be down. And I'm like, okay, that's cool.
look at my life. Like, tell me something I don't already deal with.
Say a monster then. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even not to make this about men too, but like hormones in general, like we just have not done a great job of like understanding the interplay of hormonal balance, how that changes over time. And like, look, we're living longer, right? We have more technology, more things at our disposal to make life comfortable enough for us to live an extended period of time. You know, men are going through this too. You see this all the time with like testosterone. Sometimes at a certain point in your life, you're going to need, like, for us, it's progesterone, estrogen. Like, what is the balance? No one's, I shouldn't say no one. People are talking about it, but not at the level that I would love to see. And I think I completely agree with you. And I love the like Gen Z. Let's blast things on TikTok and Instagram, Twitter. Like, we're just out here. It's
Yeah.
this life. Life's hard enough. Let's be real about it. We're not going to like skirt
Hmm.
around issues because of niceties like our grandparents and parents did. And then we're in this interesting place as millennials, I feel like, where we we have things entrenched from an
Yeah.
older generation, but we feel very like forced or pulled. There's a magnetic pull to a younger generation that is being bold like we want it to be, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like that too. I feel like our generation, Terrence calls us the lost generation. He's like, we're the second lost generation.
For real.
And I don't
He's not
disagree.
wrong.
I feel like we kind of got mixed up in all of the things. And I feel like we spent so many years with unhealthy coping mechanisms just by the nature of our generation that we could have been bold, but instead we were mired in like war and um, housing market crashes and nobody can find a job. And we kind of got lost in just going from place to place, even mentally. And Gen Z just seems to have such a, they're not drinking as much as our generation did or does. And they kind of just have like this bigger scope of like, we're not going to take this shit anymore. We're talking about periods. We're talking about Palestine. We're talking about X, Y, and Z. And so it feels good. It's like, no, okay, I'll be with you guys.
Yeah, I think it's also like, look, the conversation around women in general, and I think this is like, okay, I was just on vacation with my brother, my sister-in-law, and two other families. We're all around the same age relatively, so I think youngest adult on the trip was maybe 36, oldest was 40, so pretty close in age, and six kids ranging from a 10-year-old to a 3-month-old infant. Um, it is still fascinating to see like the interplay of generational stigma around like husband wife role, mother father in a modern day, while like all of us are on this boat. We're all on Instagram. All the adults are like posting things and like watching TikToks and making jokes and want to play games and like stay relevant. We're in this weird place and time where like I guess technically we are really old, but we're not old at all. And we didn't get to hit the milestones that our parents' generation did at younger ages. So I personally feel this sense of like, no, you're not going to tell me that I'm too old to do anything.
Yes.
When the time is right, like when I get my money right or my whatever situation, I feel like a lot of it for many of us, especially females, is like you can talk about mental health and circle and circle and circle, but there are really dark, heavy conversations that we have been forced to snuff out our
Mm.
entire lives, and we're just tired of it. Like, I will, my brother will probably kill me because one of the nights it was so, it sticks out to me. It was very, like a dark but funny. All the kids go to bed. We're about to play cards. All the adults, like, grab your beer. Okay. We're sitting at the table. And one of the guys said something about one of the females being bitchy. That was all it took. This was
Mhm.
not a cute night anymore. All the women sat in the living room, all the men sat at the table, and then there was this like divide of like, who's gonna do what to get the girls back at the table, or like vice versa, right? And so we're all sitting there. I'm like, I'm chilling. I'm making jokes. We're hanging out. We hear the men. The men start crawling. Mind you, it's a small, like it was a big
Right.
house. It's open. We can hear you, buffoons. Like, oh, should we like put a radio on our shoulder and go out like with our boombox and make a gesture? I'm like, yeah. So I start chirping in, like answering their questions from the other room, and I hear my brother go, "Shut up, Gretch, no one asked you." I'm like, well, you need some guidance because y'all's wives don't want to talk to you right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, little gesture goes a long way. But what I loved about the whole thing was that, one, it never escalated to this like crazy, like all out fight, but every single woman stood on principle. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
too late. This isn't cute. This isn't 2003 where I just like took every insult
Yeah.
at my way and acted like it was hilarious and then repeated those insults to other women just to
Yeah.
stay in a group. Like, it's not cute anymore. It's not cool. And it also like diminishes the space that you create to be able to have conversations about all the other hard stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I don't
Did
know.
they
It was really cool because
did
I'm
you
not
come
like,
back to the table?
what?
Did they get it together? Did you guys come back to the table?
No, most of us went to bed. But it was really funny because I was like, you know what? Like, the one person who is the most worked up about it, like, I think that she got her point across. And we all woke up the next morning and were able to make breakfast and have a great day. But no one caved because of hurt feelings, or I don't know, the walking on eggshells because you're in a group setting and, we're all friends, but some of us aren't as close as others.
Right.
Like, no, there's something bigger here. And I feel like that goes to a lot of how Gen Z also like kind of doubles down on certain topics in
Mm-hmm.
conversation that, like, as soon as someone gets uncomfortable, we tend to skirt away from. Like, I will say take full responsibility for this, but like even back as like early as 2016 time frame, I went off Facebook because I couldn't stand the political, terrible, like negativity that Facebook had become. And a lot of it was coming from my own family members that were very conservative and on one side. And it just felt very black and white. I don't know that that's necessarily the answer. It was good for me at the time, have a little bit of like
Getting
distance.
on Facebook is like it feels good.
It feels good, but then like what's the difference with Instagram now? Or like it just feels like it evolves into something else eventually.
Does.
Um and so there's a part of it like, how do you protect your peace, but still be willing to contribute to like an effective dialogue? I
I
feel like we lost a lot of like neutral voices because people got so tapped out. And it's the same with women's health, women's rights, like all of these big issue areas. Anyone that's a person of color or a minority is like, bro, this is not my cross to bear anymore. Like, I'm tired, I'm tapped out, rightly so. I don't know how that changes.
I definitely have gotten tapped out. I think it was around maybe 20, was it 2019? I don't fucking remember. Like it was 2016, then it was 2018, then it was 2019, then it was 2020, then it was definitely 2021. And most recently, like in my personal life, even, I've gotten to this point where I'm not interested in um other people's business in this way that I need to be involved deeply inside of everybody's shit, right? And so it's like I had a friend get mad at me about this because I didn't tell her something that was happening with her someone else. And I was like, it's not my business. I said, I am a single mom. I'm working full time. I'm blending a family. I've got 5 kids. I have a career on top of my working full time. Like, it's not my job is not to be the bone collector for anybody else anymore. It's to be there when I'm needed, to always be open with my friends, and I'm here for you. But what I'm not going to do is rile myself up into like this this crazy land, and forget like what I'm actually here to be doing because I will get burned out and then I'm good to no one.
And I think you've also, I mean, I will just use your specific life and example here, but you've worked really, really, really hard to have the kingdom that you do, the family, the community that you've built, and it's not just physical community right where you live now. You have friends all over the world at this point that believe in you, but like cultivating that takes a lot of time and energy. And at a certain point, as I've watched you evolve, I think I have as well, which is really encouraging because you see a lot of people that don't necessarily, they stall out or they think they've checked the boxes, they've gotten where they want to be, they have the life they want.
Yeah.
You're a continuous learner, so you're always going to push yourself. And I think it makes complete sense. Like that one, you just don't like, you don't have any gas in the tank for what feels like even gossip. Like, is this piece of information about someone else
Hmm.
going to positively impact my life, everything I've worked hard for? Is it neutral or negative? And
Right.
really, if it's not good,
Go to the store. Yes, I think this is also part of that whole millennial haze thing too, is just like, especially here in the Midwest, it's like people are just like so like there's so much like tension in a room and nobody says anything. Okay, we gotta wrap. I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming on and bearing your soul. Thanks, my love. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.